Good morning, everyone. Another made up place. This is a condensed video of something I did earlier this year over on Patreon. It's a 9 by 12 sheet of Arch, 140 pound cold pressed paper. And I'm doing all my ink work there with the Lamy Safari pen. So this is sped up quite a bit, so I'm just going to jump in and tell you what the process was. The sky was just a loose wash of ultramarine and cobalt blue, using the big old mop brush to put lots of paint down. Got the whole area covered, and then I'm just going to mop out a few random clouds here and there. Picked a few clouds and added a bit of gray for shadow underneath. And now I can do my glow at the horizon, which is a combination. I've got some cadmium yellow, some Naples yellow, some cadmium orange, all kinds of colors going in. Do the transition between the blue and the yellow, and then I just mopped out a few more clouds. Now this is kind of an urban scene. So I decided to put some houses in the background, silhouettes of houses in the background. I did them in ultramarine blue to push them back in the distance so there's no detail, and then I mopped out the base of those houses too to push them even further back. This place kind of reminds me of my grandfather's house way back in the 60s. I'm putting a bit of foliage in the background. That's just a combination of the yellows and a bit of sap green, and grabbing some undersea green for the darker underside of those shrubs. By the way, thanks to everyone who has subscribed and followed and all the great comments. I read them all. Thank you so much. Now for the chimney, that's just Davies Gray and a bit of burnt sienna. And I'm going to give my fence a weathered look here, so I'm starting out with the burnt sienna and dropping in some Payne's Gray. Now for my trees, I've got the mop brush out again, and really wet mixture of cadmium yellow. By the way, my board's on a bit of a tilt, so it's running down, which is awesome. That's what I wanted. And I'm just dropping in sap green, some more yellow, and I'm trying to get the underside a little darker. I did do some hatching there, so it's not imperative that I have it really dark underneath, because the hatching is supposed to do that for me. And with it wet, I can just move it around and get the look I want. Adding a few darks underneath, and then to get some leafy look, I'm just adding a few grains of salt. Now this little tree here, I didn't want him to be yellow, so I've gone with sorry, I didn't want them to be green. I did want them to be yellowy orange, so I used some cadmium yellow and some cadmium orange to create that random tree over there on the right. Using the same process for my fence as I did over on the left-hand side, just burnt sienna, really wet, and throwing some Payne's Gray in down where the fence meets the ground. Since I had the dark colors out, also I went under the car. Trying to be efficient with my time and moving around to dry spots and painting. I put a little outbuilding in the back. I fussed with it quite a bit in real time. Started out brown, went blue. Anyway, I settled on a combination between the two and just mopped out the base of that building just to push it back in the yard a little bit. Tree trunks are wet and wet. I wet the trunk area first and just added paint and let it do its thing on the paper. Now my tile roof is started out with cadmium yellow and now going to town with the burnt sienna. Wet and wet, just dropping colors in and letting them determine where they want to go. My little orange tree was looking a little flat, so I've just added a bit of color on the underside. For the foreground, that is yellow ochre, going with a bit of an autumn or a fall look here. So I've got yellow ochre and I'm dropping in some olive green, wet and wet. And once again, the paint pretty well created the texture of grass, and I didn't have to do too much with that. So for the stonework at the front, the foundation of the house, just a bit of raw sienna. Again, wet and wet, and I'm throwing in burnt sienna and Payne's gray. Now this guy's taking care of his house, so the wood is relatively new looking. So that is a yellow ochre, and I've got some raw sienna and burnt sienna. It's new, but it's still got some footwear on it, so I added a bit of Payne's gray with the wet and wet. Well, I had the Payne's gray out. I'm using it for the shadow under the car. And boy, I was in a shadow mood, so I put the shadow on the fence. So it looks like my light is coming from the upper left and throwing shadow to the right. So the house is casting a bit of shadow on that fence. And these stairs are at the side of the house, so there we go. Using the same dark mixture to throw the shadow onto those steps. This is one of those cases when if you're following along, I never know what the color of my houses are going to be, or I envision a house, but I'm not really sure of the colors I'm going to use. So I start adding shadow and inking. It's procrastination is what it is, and I'm just trying to figure out what colors I'm going to apply next. I knew I wanted my car yellow, so there's the cadmium yellow for the car. And I'm in Canada, so I'm adding a bit of rust around the bumper and the trunk. So my windows are essentially the color of the sky. They got a little bit dark on me, so when the camera's off, I mopped out a bit of color. And here's my decorative bricks. They're Davies Gray, really wet, and dropping in burnt sienna for the underside. And a bit of Payne's Gray for the dirt. So it looks like I've decided on the color of my house. And I think yellow ochre is the winner. So it's a yellow ochre house. I'll get the base of it all in nice and wet, and then start dropping in the burnt siennas. Here I'm just mopping out some highlights where the light's hitting the front of the house. And that also separates the front from the addition. This gives it a little bit of contrast. Combination of grays for my front step and the sidewalk. And a very welcoming door of sap green. And it's nice and wet, so I'm just dropping in a dab of cadmium yellow. Bit of a highlight. Well, at this point, we're just about done. I'm just trying to figure out what a good contrast color for the trim would be. And given it's kind of a wooden-looking structure, really earthy, I'm going with the burnt sienna for the trim. And here I'm just adding a few shadows on the windows. Now my roof is extended quite a bit um, over the structure, so I get to paint in some nice deep shadows. Really finishes the place off, gives it some depth, nice contrast. And that should about do it. So again, longer version of this over on Patreon. If you want prints of this painting, it's over on Etsy. Thanks for dropping by, and we'll see you again soon.